could all rise for pledge of allegiance? We'll call the roll.
Councilor Frank. Councilor Vido. Councilor Rodriguez. Councilor Ray Recupero. Councilor Murphy. Councilor Lopez. Councilor Tejada. Councilor Garcia. Councilor Avellaneda. Councilor Cortell.
Here.
Councilor Robinson. 10 members present. You have a quorum, Mr. Chairman. Let me see. Public speaking.
Public speaking section is open. Anybody wish to speak publicly?
Good evening, Honorable Council, City Manager Ambrosino. My name is John Valanche. I'm a Chelsea resident. I live at 13 Cheever Street. Earlier this month, Councilor Avellaneda proposed to initiate a planning process that calls for the rezoning of the segment of the waterfront along Marginal Street from Highland Ave to Winnisimmett. Per the Councilor's order, City Manager Ambrosino and the Chelsea Planning Department must draft a zoning amendment for the Council to review within 45 days, allowing for a waterfront residential commercial overlay district within the excessively industrial space. While some of the opportunities that could potentially develop from such a rezoning are worthwhile to consider, the hastiness with which this order and subsequent review are being conducted seems haphazard in the wake of the comprehensive waterfront planning process that is currently underway in our city. In order to gather more information about the Councilor's proposal and to engage more critically with vested stakeholders along the waterfront, we as concerned residents and members of Green Roots, and sorry for not saying it sooner, this is on the behalf of Green Roots, would like to propose that representatives from the city attend the next monthly Green Roots meeting, which is scheduled for Thursday, November 10th at 6 p.m., to provide a presentation and allow for questions and answers about the proposal. In doing so, members of Green Roots hope to gather more information about the process in general and engage more deeply with city officials on the benefits and drawbacks of this process in the context of the Chelsea Creek Municipal Harbor Planning process set to be launched in January 2017. Green Roots looks forward to discussing this further in order to develop innovative and collaborative solutions for developments that are sustainable, equitable, and environmentally conscious. We ask that representatives who wish to speak on the issue, please RSVP to Roseanne Bongiovanni and or Maria Bellenpower to confirm arrangements for the event. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Any additional public speakers? Second call. Any additional public speakers? Seeing none, public speaking section is closed. Next order of business. Memorandums and celebratory resolutions.
None, Mr. Chairman. Communication. Let me see. Approval of the minutes of September 26th and October 3rd.
Do we know those?
Under suspension, if there's no objection.
Seeing no objection? Communications from the city manager.
Let's see. First communication from the city manager, fiscal year 2017 tax rates. Dear councilors, I am writing to request that the Chelsea City Council schedule a meeting of the Subcommittee on Conference on Monday, October 24, 2016, or on a more convenient date soon thereafter, for the purpose of discussing the fiscal year 2017 tax rates. My goal at that meeting is to provide a PowerPoint presentation and then answer questions about FY17 valuations and the tax rate in a format similar to what was done last October. I also asked that the City Council schedule a public hearing with the Board of Assessors on Monday, November 7, 2016, for the purpose of voting on the minimum residential factor and setting of the tax rate for FY17.
communication and set up a conference for 10/24/2016.
Seeing no objection, accepted and filed, there is a meeting set for the 6 o'clock on October 24th with regard to a presentation from the city manager on the tax rates.
And we'll be scheduling a public hearing on November 7th.
We're also going to schedule a public hearing on November 7th.
The next communication, abandonment of an easement. Dear councilors, as part of the city's ongoing infrastructure improvements in and around the One North neighborhood, the administration reviewed all parcels for infrastructure needs. During our review, we identified an old drainage easement located near the project which is not in use. We now wish to abandon this easement. The easement at issue was granted as a permanent easement in 1954 after the city entered into a land swap with the Commonwealth. Typically, whenever the Commonwealth laid out a public road, it would grant easements for access and connection to municipal drains. This was such a case. This particular easement is a rectangular area of approximately 120 square feet beneath land owned by One North of Boston, abutting the southeasterly side of Bryson Road. In the years following the 1954 land swap, the city never proceeded to install the drainage lines in the adjacent public way. We are now concluding our major Mass Works infrastructure project in the area, and the work similarly did not include any municipal storm drain system in this area. In summary, there is not now, nor will there be in the future, any drainage structures within the 40-foot wide public way abutting this easement. Accordingly, the easement no longer serves any public purpose. The Department of Public Works and I recommend...
Council Avenatti moves to accept and file the communication. There's be something coming up under new business.
That's it on the communications from the city manager. We have communications and petitions to the council. We have a copy of a communication received from Jeanette Centron, city clerk, parking clerk, regarding the warrant for the state election November 8th, 2016.
There'll be an order coming up on the new business.
Second readings, Mr. Chairman. We have...
Second readings.
Second readings. Under second readings, we have a second reading of a pursuant to Section 4-2 of the Charter of the City of Chelsea, I'm writing to recommend for appointment to the Community Schools Advisory Board, Ms. Camelia Burnell, 37 Springville Ave in Chelsea, for a 3-year term expiring in 2019.
Vote on the appointment, on acceptance.
Clerk will call the roll.
Yes, to affirm the appointment. Councilor Frank.
Yes.
Councilor Vido.
Yes.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilor Recupero. Yes. Councilor Murphy. Yes. Councilor Lopez.
Yes.
Councilor Tahada. Yes. Councilor Garcia.
Yes.
Councilor Avellaneda. Absent. Councilor Cortell.
Yes.
Councilor Robinson.
Yes.
10 in favor, none opposed, 1 absent. The motion is affirmed. New business. First order under new business. Order introduced by Councilor Avellaneda. Whereas Massachusetts Department of Transportation, MassDOT officials have recently recommended a range of new projects to address the local area's current and future demands, and whereas those plans include such possible projects as a new Orange Line stop and a new pedestrian bridge over the Malden River, providing Everett residents better access to said new Orange Line station. And whereas the Green Dot policy is MassDOT's comprehensive environmental responsibility and substantially initiative which entails integrating sustainability principles into all aspects of the way that MassDOT plans, designs, builds, and operates our state transportation system. And whereas the Green Dot policy includes 2 goals, which are reducing greenhouse gas emissions and promoting healthy transportation modes. And whereas there are proven regional economic and environmental benefits to reconnecting Chelsea Street, Charlestown with the Broadway corridor, now therefore be it resolved that the Chelsea City Council, on behalf of its residents, and in an attempt to both make Chelsea a healthier city by reducing gas emissions and provide alternative low-cost transportation access to Boston, hereby request that its state, federal elected officials, along with the city manager, lobby MassDOT, and the governor's office on a continuous basis to build a pedestrian bike bridge along the Morris J. Tobin Memorial Bridge as part of its transit plan.
Chair recognizes Counsel Avenatti.
For a roll call vote? And if I may speak on it?
Sure. Chair recognizes Counsel Avenatti.
Thank you. And to my colleagues and to the public, over the course of the last couple of years, one of the discussions we've had or I've been a part of, has been with Conservation Law Foundation and bike advocates about improving walkways and bike paths, particularly for Chelsea residents. And as a former member of or employee of MassDOT, one of those discussions, or some of it, was envisioning some sort of idea of having a connection between Chelsea and Charlestown and using the Tobin Bridge as a way of doing it. Now, before anyone thinks that I'm talking about putting a bike path on the top deck, that's not what I'm talking about. There's a reason why there's a fence up there right now. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is envisioning somehow using the structure itself below, under deck, to create this bike path pedestrian way to connect the girders on a lower level, going across from the end of Broadway and reconnect what was a connection from way back in the day to Charlestown side. And this envision would have be solely for people to walk or bike across, not a vehicle of any sort and kind. Now, with the announcement that MassDOT is in the middle of talking about creating a bike path, pedestrian bridge in Malden Everett to cross the river over there to connect people to the train station, and having been at the opening of the pedestrian bike path over in Charlestown and in Cambridge over the railroad line, I know that this can be done. And in doing so, I want to put this on the radar and hopefully put this as part of the long-term planning that goes on. Something like this idea, would take many years. But you got to start somewhere. And it starts in the long-term plan as they're formulating their 5 to 7 to 8 year plan right now, to put this idea in front of them and saying, look, can you talk about setting some money aside for envisioning this bike path, using the bridge structure, having some engineers looking at it, setting aside $100,000 or $150,000 of your overall budget, and doing a study of what it would do. And then maybe phase 2 and 3 and so forth is then seeking funding. But I got to start somewhere. And I say this because as a community, we're talking about less use of cars, the traffic that there is, and this could be a great way of doing it. If you take a look at Somerville, Arlington, communities on the other side who have hubway bike stations in their communities and are renting bikes and they're literally commuting into Boston, well, we could have that here. You can envision hubway stations on Broadway if there's a connection from us to Boston. And the easiest way to do that is to use the structure that's already there, which is the Tobin Bridge. Also, people talk about how lively Broadway was, 50 years ago. Well, that coincided with the fact that we had a bridge that connected directly to Charlestown on the street level, and it was closed and removed, and they built the bridge. And therein led what I would say the lower economic development along the Broadway corridor. So this is just a way of us saying, look, if you want us to have less use of cars, if we want to really help our residents to be able to travel and open Boston by being able to just walk or bike there, then this is the way. Put this on their radar screen as they're doing the long-term planning and say, look, put this on your study, have this on your plan and say, can we use the structure to build that bikeway? And really, I think this will be a fantastic benefit to our community. And if we're talking about having our residents depend less on cars, then this would be the way. Thank you.
Chair against Councilor Tahada.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Roy for bringing this up. It's actually been a thought of mine for a while that it would be great if there was a way to connect Chelsea with Boston. And over the summer, I took my kids on one of those Boston Harbor cruises. And when you're on a boat going through the locks, there's actually a bridge that people use for biking and walking that gets halted as the doors open up for the boats to come through. So I'd like to just commend Mr. Villaneta for bringing this up, putting it on the radar, as I think it's a fantastic idea and something that would bring a lot of prominence to Chelsea.
Chair against Councilor Frank.
I'd start off by saying I do plan on voting in the affirmative for this. I know a couple of years ago, I would advise that everybody, or at least the city manager, look at the planning department. There are some charrette plans from the Harvard School of Design, I believe. 4 years ago, there was a charrette is basically a fancy way of saying like a design visioning process by people who are still in grad school for this sort of thing. They had a charrette about the Tobin Bridge about 4 years ago. I remember I sitting in the meeting a couple years ago. We sat down and talked to them, and they brought up the concept of having a elevated walkway / bikeway underneath the bridge, and that was one of the plans they brought up. The reason why I suggest kind of proactively going to the planning department and seeing if they still have those plans is at the time there were a lot of concerns that were brought up, including how to get the gradients, how to have side-off areas, so when people are walking along, if they need to stop, they'll occasionally need places to stop, what to do in case of high winds, what to do in case an LNG tanker is a little bit too tall, what to do during a blizzard, and so forth. So my suggestion would be to reach out to the planning department, see if they still have those, tentative plans, and maybe the city could show that we're a little bit serious about what we want to do by saying how would we address that on our side? Because the gradient probably would be something that would be an issue on our side, because anybody looking up the bridge can see it's pretty high up there. You're going to have to get a person up that hill to get wherever if there's a ramp of some sort, however you get that person up, and where that access point would be. So that would be my suggestion. I do think it's a good idea. I actually have friends who bike and walk to Boston. There's a gentleman who lives right in downtown Chelsea who actually walks to his job in downtown Boston. He walks down Route 99, and it probably takes him 20 minutes longer than if he was able to just walk right up and over the bridge. Because anybody who stands up at Anvils Hill can tell you it's not that far away to get to downtown Boston. And I think actually it would be helpful to create that loop even for communities like East Boston, because the hubway was brought up. I know they plan on bringing the hubway to East Boston at some point, if not already in the process. Maybe, I believe, next spring. I have some friends who work over there who said that was a big project they were working on. I would actually personally love to see hubway go from East Boston to Chelsea and then back up over to Charlestown and kind of create our own little loop, because that's what they have in Cambridge, that's what they have in Somerville. It's a nice low-cost way for people to get to work. So I am in support of it, but I do think the city needs to do more than advocate. The city would need to basically say, okay, we want the state to do this, we want our elected officials to push for this. Here are the problems we see on our side, possibly using that charrette information. How do we resolve those issues so that way the state doesn't just look at us and be like, oh, we can't do that because of X, Y, and Z. If we say, okay, well, here are the solutions, they would have to tell us why they can't do it for other reasons. Just from a logistical point of view. Thank you.
Any other councilors? Just briefly speak from the chair. it's articulated well by both councilors. I think it would be a beneficial thing to look into. I agree, it's a long-term thing. It's kind of a dream. But you look at a city, you look at like the fact that you can walk across the Brooklyn Bridge into Manhattan based on the fact that it was built with sidewalks. And you look at communities all throughout this area that I know when I was a kid, they have old railroad tracks that basically take you all the way from as far away as, I think, almost Concord, basically down Mass Avenue, all the way into Boston on a bike route. For us to be any part of something like that and give people the option would do a tremendous amount for just as a luxury, as something someone could use to get into Boston, and would also be an asset to the community, and I think would do something for property values as well. So I will be voting for it. Commend my counselor for coming up with it as well, fellow counselor. Clerk will call the roll.
Councilor Frank? Yes. Councilor Vido?
Yes.
Councilor Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilor Recupero? Yes. Councilor Murphy? Councilor Lopez?
Yes.
Councilor Tahada?
Yes.
Councilor Garcia?
Yes.
Councilor Avellaneda?
Yes.
Councilor Cortell?
Yes.
Councilor Robinson?
Yes.
11 in favor, none opposed, motion adopted. Next order introduced by Councilor Recupero. Order that the city manager look into creating more 30-minute parking spots in the City Hall parking lot for city business.
Chair recognizes Councilor Recupero.
I'd like to adopt under suspension, if there's no objection.
Seeing no objection, wish to speak on it?
Yes, I would like to speak on
Chair
it.
recognizes Councilor Recupero.
Downstairs, there's many parking spots, but it always seems to be an issue for the residents of our community to find a parking spot to come. Not only the residents, anybody that wants to do business at City Hall has an issue with parking. There's not enough parking spots for them. So if the city manager will look into maybe increasing a few more spots for people to come in and be able to do business in City Hall. That's all, there's not enough. There's only, if you look downstairs, there's only, 12 spots? 12 for all the people of the city, I don't think is a lot. Well, it's a start. But if we can make it better for the residents and the people that do business to come in and have a more friendly City Hall to come into by parking instead of going 95 blocks to find a spot, then it would be a better, beneficial, I think, to the people. Thank you.
Any other councilors? Seeing none, it's adopted unanimously under suspension.
Order introduced by Councilor Cortell. Whereas the city administration has determined that abandonment of the covered drainage easement located at or near 1 North near Bryson Street is proper and shown on the attached easement plan. Whereas the Commonwealth's Department of Public Works granted a permanent easement in 1954 after the city entered into a land swap with their prior property owners.
Any portion of the communication, that's for a roll call vote. If there are no objections,
Seeing no objection. Just to speak for a second on this, this was read as part of a communication. This is an easement that's no longer used by the city, and it's now in an area that's owned by 1 North. We don't use it, we haven't used it in a long time, and so we're officially giving it up, which we lose nothing because we did not use it. It's administrative in nature, essentially.
Councilor Frank? Yes. Councilor Vido? Yes. Councilor Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilor Recupero? Yes. Councilor Murphy? Councilor Lopez?
Yes.
Councilor Tahada? Yes. Councilor Garcia?
Yes.
Councilor Avellaneda?
Yes.
Councilor Cortell?
Yes.
Councilor Robinson?
yes.
11 in favor, none opposed, motion adopted. Next order introduced by Councilor Robinson, a request that the city manager provide to the council all reports from Capic and North Suffolk Mental Health, as well as the number of people served along with their status.
Adopt this unanimously under suspension. Actually, I'm just kind of looking for some numbers as to how many people that we've served in this whole project between Capic and North Suffolk Mental Health. As I know, in June, they'll be coming up for a new contract. I'd like to be able to see what numbers there are.
Next order introduced by Councilor Vido, order that the city manager, along with the city council, establish an ordinance for playing field permitting with specific criteria to ensure that priority lies with Chelsea youth and Chelsea residents.
Chair recognizes Councilor Vido.
To accept and file under suspension if there are no objections, and I'd like to speak on it, please. adopted.
Chair recognizes Councilor Vido.
So here I go again with this Highland Park permitting thing. I'm just trying to figure out a way for us to really get to the bottom of this. I am constantly getting phone calls and emails. Some of the people involved are starting to feel threatened. I guess there are comments going around. There's a rumor circulating that there's people from this side that are involved. We just received a letter, I'm sure everybody has it, from residents that have issues with the way that the field is being permitted. What I'm asking for, I want to thank the city manager for taking the responsibility away from the city clerk's office and putting it in the recreational department, because I think that that allows for a fairer game. What I'm looking for now is an ordinance or something with specific criteria as to how we can permit these fields, and that Chelsea youth and residents are given priority. I'm asking him to do that along with the city council. Maybe that's something that we can do in the subcommittee, I'm not sure. But look, ideally, we'd have one youth soccer league, we'd have one football league. We have Pop Warner, we have Pride. There's way too much division in the city. Ideally, we'd have one soccer league, and everybody will serve as coaches, and then we can all live happily ever after. Unfortunately, that's not what's happening here. And in the past, there wasn't enough representation on this side to speak up for a vast amount of the community. I just want an opportunity to make sure that this is fair, that this is transparent. I don't play soccer, so I have no horses in the race. I just want our kids and our Chelsea residents to have priority. So I hope that we can really just try to get to the bottom of this, so that moving forward for 2017, we don't have this mess anymore. We can just try to work this out like adults. There's no reason for anyone to feel that they're not welcomed in their city, that they're being threatened, that they're not allowed. There's no room for that here. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Any other councilors? Okay, speak briefly from the chair. So I'm not against this, and I'm not standing in the way of it. My understanding, just so people know, is that there is already a priority. I'm not sure it's by ordinance, but there is a priority, certainly for Chelsea youth, and I believe also Chelsea residents. Now, there has been questions raised as to how effectively that has been monitored, and that issue has come up. We do have coming up basically a new department that is going to handle these matters, and the hope on behalf of City Council is that with the initiation of, we have a new city clerk, so the previous city clerk has left. There is a new city clerk. It used to be in the city clerk's office. Not only is there a new city clerk, but it also will not be in the city clerk's department. It'll be in the health department, in a health and recreational department, something that's a new department. So some of us are, this is not out of line with that, but are looking to see that department develop and hope that some of these issues are worked out as a new individual begins to handle these matters and does it in a way that hopefully is fair and transparent, and we can follow them. I know there was an issue with some record keeping recently in some of the documentation. So I know where it's coming from, certainly not against it, but I did want to just state there is in place those preferences already. Chair recognizes Councilor Avenatti.
Point of inquiry. Could you have the city solicitor answer whether this is, should be a more towards a code set by the city manager, which he writes, versus an ordinance that is more of the laws? I think this falls under codes and not actually falls under an ordinance. So could you ask if maybe we are, basically, this is out of order, possibly? Can I have that answered by the city solicitor?
We suspend for the city clerk to address the question.
I don't generally like to just give legal advice off the top of my head. This particular order is involving two matters. One is city-owned property, which comes under both the purview, order of the city manager, but also the city council, so it kind of balances that line. But it also establishes a way of who may use city-owned property, which, yes, would violate the charter in the way that it is written. So it may be an administrative code is easier and will pass legal muster under the city charter. However, it's a policy directive. It's just the way that it's drafted, but it's a policy directive to the city manager that the priority should be to Chelsea residents and Chelsea youth when using city playgrounds and fields. I believe that's already in play, as was stated by the council president.
So with that said, I would move to amend it to change the word ordinance to requisite guidelines, or
Code.
Executive order by the city manager or so forth and so on, yes. That's a little bit easier to pass legal muster, yes.
I think, does that solve everything for everybody?
Requisite.
Chair recognizes Council Robinson.
When we do look at this matter, I think it's appropriate that we ask for identification of who are actually using the parks. I know years ago, when we ran a basketball league, we had about 10 teams playing, and one of the rules were you could only have one outside player from who wasn't a Chelsea resident to participate, but the rest of them had to be Chelsea residents. So I think that's something we should think about or take a look at.
When we are in doubt, when non-Chelsea people or businesses want to use our gyms through the community schools, we do request sometimes a roster list. At Chelsea Public Schools, at Chelsea Community Schools, people sign release forms on very strenuous physical activity, so they're not only releasing the organization that's running the program, but they're also releasing the city of Chelsea and the Chelsea Public Schools. We do know where they live at that time because they're signing up for a league. There are ways where we can at least determine whether or not the league or the people who are sponsoring the event are Chelsea residents, and it's easy to determine whether or not youth are using the fields or not. Under 18.
Thank you.
So the order was amended to strike out establish an ordinance.
Amended.
And amended to requisite guidelines.
Chair recognizes Council Avenado.
Good point, but I just want to have you recognize, I know that, for example, the softball league, both men in the years past and now has a number of players that are from outside, but traditionally it's run by someone who's local. So I don't want to negatively impact some of the leagues that are running here. So we better be careful of the intentions. I know the intentions are there, but you may be harming existing leagues that would maybe not be able to have them run if they don't have some outsiders as part of it. So if you're going to start carding everyone, make sure that there's only one person on a team, for example, on a softball team, and only one person can be non-Chelsea resident or whatever, it may impact it. And I would just make sure that we talk to all of the adult leagues. I know that when I was participating in a men's basketball league down at the old Merritt Park, a lot of the basketball players were not from here. I know that our colleague here just finished having a summer basketball league, and I know it was in private, but she couldn't have run that on Highland basketball court because many of the players were from either Everett or so forth. So imagine them not being able to be here. So let's make sure that we're running this, that it's not saying just Chelsea folks and harming what's out there. Again, I get the priority for the youth, but we better be careful because we may end up harming some points here. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, in light of some relatively direct reference, I'll let Council Vido.
I appreciate that, Councilor Avellaneda. I think that the priority for Chelsea youth, It's something that would only apply to the youth leagues. I mean, obviously, we want to make sure that whoever the adults are, that they are Chelsea residents as well. But if a couple sneak in from out of towns, I don't think that there's any harm there. My main concern is when I've gotten complaints from residents when their kids go to play and they're not allowed to play because the field is permitted to an adult league, or that someone has used it under the guise of a youth league but is really running adult programming. That's the concern that I have. So I think, while I understand what you're saying, I think it's more related to the youth and focusing on Chelsea youth. And I'm not sure what you're referring to with regards to the movement league that Jameer and I did. We did have maybe 1 or 2 kids, but the majority, they were all Chelsea residents. But just had to point that out there. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Councilor Frank.
I think some of the concerns that were brought up is exactly why I think the administrative code and putting the power within the new department makes more sense than an ordinance. So I do thank the councilors for making that movement, because I've made that same argument about like the questions we have in November that we're voting on. You know, when you've got something very solid, it's like yes or no, 1 or 2. And then you get 1.5 and you're like, oh, well, where does that go? And it ends up, you know, it doesn't happen because it doesn't fit into, you know, the 1 or the 2 or the yes or the no. So I would say I think a lot of the issues that might or might not be present would actually begin resolving themselves the second that we have a recreation department with all the proper paperwork in place, transparency in place, because then you could look at it. So without explicitly saying, oh, you know, don't do this, or this, kind of looking blindly into it, we could look at the sheet and actually see, oh, okay, so 9 out of the 10 of these people aren't from Chelsea. Or, you know what, maybe there's 2 people from that league in Chelsea. I really, if there's 100 kids in the league and 2 of them from East Boston, I don't want to go shutting down that league. I think that would be kind of crazy. One thing I would say as a counselor did bring up that we have many different soccer leagues, many different football leagues, many different leagues going on. When we come up with these codes, one thing I would suggest is basically have language that encourages these smaller leagues that might not have enough kids or enough adults participating, that they need to bring more people in from out of town. If your league, to consolidate with other leagues, if your league can't survive without having half the league from Everett, and then we have another league waiting to use the field that is 100% Chelsea or close to it, why not combine the 2? Or if you have 2 leagues where half of this league is Chelsea, half of this league is Chelsea, and they both tell us we can't survive without outsiders, they should be encouraged to move together. And if they don't, somebody at City Hall has to be willing to say, you know what, we're going to go with somebody else because you guys don't want to get along. Because let's be perfectly honest, a lot of the times when we have, and I'm not going to be very popular with some of the sports leagues out there for saying this, a lot of the reasons why we have these splits is because adults don't get along. That 13-year-old and that 13-year-old really don't care if they're in League A or League B or League C most of the time. It's Mr. A doesn't want to work with Mr. B, so they create their own league. But then Mr. B doesn't get along with Mr. C, they create their own league. And then we end up with this situation where we have all these leagues, not enough fields, you have to bring in outsiders to fill in those slots, and you get this really crazy big mess. So I think the transparency would help consolidate some of that, and the city needs to be willing to be the bad guy and basically start encouraging some of these smaller leagues to start folding themselves back into each other or face the prospect of not getting any field space. I know that sounds like a mean thing to do. Maybe I'm a mean person. I don't mind being a mean person. Somebody has to do it. Somebody has to be the bad guy occasionally to make sure things move. So I do hope that we could kind of resolve this with the new department and put some real serious teeth in this department to get stuff done. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Councilor Lopez.
The question here is that the youth of Chelsea and the adults from Chelsea want to play, and I don't think they are having enough time to play, and we have to look away for them to play, because I think the youth and the people who live in Chelsea are a priority. Whatever time is left, we can give it to somebody else. Thank you.
So just speak briefly again. Again, it was well articulated by many people, but we did have a subcommittee meeting that was called by the sponsor and counselor of this. And we did have a conversation, and the long and short of it is, we have a shortage of fields that a number of different entities want to play on, especially during what would be considered to be prime time. I do acknowledge, based on some information requested, that it's tough to track, based on the paperwork from the last city manager, about who had fields at certain times. But at the end of the day, we have a shortage of fields versus the number of entities that want to use them, be them Chelsea youth or Chelsea adults. That's something we have to address. And additionally, I'll just end by saying, I do hope that some of these things, as much as we're trying to be proactive on it, will work themselves out as we have a new department whose purpose is to specifically handle these kind of things. And so the hope is that a lot of these issues in the next permitting session will work themselves out. To recognize Councilor Recupero.
There seems to be a shortage of how to utilize our spaces, right? So isn't there some way where they can bring regular parks and bring the nets, soccer nets, to these places so they could be utilized too? If we're running out of space, make them mobile so you can bring them other places. Instead of having them all in one spot, we can use other parks. So that way everybody has a chance. Can we come across somehow to make it where they have portable nets that we can bring them like they do for hockey? Can we do the same thing for the soccer fields? Is there any way we could? Could the city manager look into it to find out if they can utilize other parks instead of just Highland Park, other parks, with not permanent ones, temporary ones, if we run out for the rest? That's something to look into.
Next order of business. Next order introduced by Councilor Vido, ordered that the city manager re-examine the newly implemented 10% water rate discount program for seniors to include owner-occupied senior condo households.
To recognize Councilor Vido.
On the suspension, if there are no objections, I'd like to speak on it.
Objecting, no? Chair recognizes Councilor Vido.
I was going to withdraw this order, but I really just want the city manager to get back to us. So we implemented a program for seniors to get 10% off their water bill, but it only applies to seniors that live in houses or that have their own separate water meter. And so I wanted to see if there was anything that we can do to try. So for example, if there's a senior that lives in a condo and they don't have their own water meter, there's no way to give them a 10% discount. So are there any other ways that we can get creative to figure out how we can do that? Can we get the main water bill from the condo association and then divvy it up depending on the space? I don't know if it's a good idea, a bad idea. I just want to get feedback from the city manager on it. So I'm looking at him and I think it's a bad idea. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. Next order. Next order introduced by Councilor Robinson, ordered that the warrant for Tuesday, November 8th, 2016 state election be accepted.
Roll call vote on the adoption.
Clerk will call the roll.
Councilor Frank?
Yes.
Councilor Vido?
Yes.
Councilor Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilor Recupero? Councilor Murphy?
Yes.
Councilor Lopez?
Yes.
Councilor Tahada?
Yes.
Councilor Garcia?
Yes.
Councilor Avellaneda?
Yes.
Councilor Cortell?
Yes.
Councilor Robinson?
Yes.
11 in favor, none opposed, motion adopted. We have a late order introduced by Councilor Avellaneda. Any objections?
Any objection on the late order?
It's on the Federal Aviation Massport Terminal E with the planes coming overhead. Okay. Whereas the Federal Aviation Administration and Massachusetts Port Authority implemented a navigation system 3 years ago that concentrated more planes into narrower flight paths, increasing the noise that residents who live under those approaches endure. And whereas the FAA and the Massport Port Authority said they will consider changes to flight patterns in and out of Logan International Airport that have triggered thousands of noise complaints from residents of Milton, Cambridge, Somerville, and other communities that the plane noise had become intolerable. And whereas Massport and the FAA recently announced that they will investigate alternatives such as having planes fly at a higher altitude or over the ocean or in airspace above a major highway. And whereas Massport said it will also undertake an analysis of runway traffic affecting Arlington, Belmont, Cambridge, and Watertown, as well as whether distances between planes could be adjusted to include more overwater operations, in a nod to air traffic noise consideration in South Boston and Hull. And whereas U.S. Representative Stephen Lynch, the congressman from that area, stated that prospect of filing a class action lawsuit against the FAA on behalf of those residents if the agency doesn't move to reduce airplane noise over those communities. And whereas Massport has filed plans for an expansion of Terminal E, which will increase the number of flights out of Logan Airport, now therefore be resolved that the Chelsea City Council, on behalf of our residents, request our Congressman, U.S. Representative Michael E. Capuano, to join his colleague on his efforts to mitigate the noise from Logan Airport and ask to include Chelsea in the proposed study by the FAA of Massport, and further join any class action lawsuit filed by Congressman Lynch.
Chair recognizes Councilman Avenatti.
Move for a roll call vote. May I speak on it?
Yep, Chair recognizes Councilman Avenatti.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Me again in my resolutions. As you may have heard and know that we are right now in the middle of public comment speaking portion of the expansion of Terminal E. And the acceptance of comments, I believe now are up to November 14th, I think the date is. I may have that date incorrect, but I just want to, I'll check on that. But real soon, the commenting period for residents to talk about the expansion of Terminal E will be closed. Now, I've already submitted, as well as my colleague, the President, Dan Cortell, comments during the drafting of this EIF, Environmental Impact Study. But the final is coming up now. And as someone who participated or was around during the lawsuit when this city was engaged in Logan, against Logan and Massport and the FAA for the opening of the runway at the time, noise is definitely, airport noise is definitely a factor here in the city of Chelsea. And I know from many comments in the waterfront area, downtown area, Central Ave, residents talk about the incessant noise of the planes and those who were not involved in the sound mitigation that was offered last go-around. When I spoke to the administration about possibly going after the Massport and the FAA and talking about a lawsuit again to get their attention, I was told that we would be wasting money, that it wasn't worth the battle. Yet, to my chagrin, here I am reading from the Boston Globe, October 7th, about how the residents from Milton, and South, they complain about the amount of noise that they get. And their congressman decides that since Massport isn't doing anything, that they threatened a class action lawsuit. And all of a sudden, we have Massport saying, hey, you know what? Maybe we'll look at the flight patterns and the way we fly over certain communities, and maybe we'll fly more over the water, and in a way to adjust the impact that we're having, negative impact on those communities, Milton, South Boston, Hull. And I'm sitting there, and I know my colleague knows that, really, but communities like Chelsea, we don't get anything. We're getting 40% of the flights. We're going to get an increase of that 40% of flights. All the numbers point that they're going to have more traffic with the expansion of Terminal E, but we're not getting anything. And Massport wants to tell us that our neighborhood doesn't deserve more soundproofing based on what is going on. So it's basically this. If you don't complain, if you don't call the number and say that I'm hearing the noise when I hear it, if you don't make a comment in this open period about the expansion of the airport right now, then we're not going to win a fight, and our congressman doesn't care. The residents of Milton have been crying and complaining in South Boston, and that's why Lynch responded. Now, I know I'm not alone in saying about the airplanes and the amount of flights, and I know there's an increase. But we have to really call our leaders and say, hey, fight for us. Fight for us. We have to fight for you guys. And I'm asking you guys to join me. Fight for our residents. Let them know that we hear them, that we hear the planes, that it's not bull to ask for these planes and to ask for more soundproofing, that it was a sham that they did last time, that they should have included more of the waterfront, they should have included the hill, and we didn't get it. It's a shame that someone like Milton, they're like 26 miles away from the airport, they can redirect flights. I know we're not going to get redirection of flights. That's a dream. I'm not asking for that, because we're right underneath. There's no way they can redirect anything. But look at the volume, look at the health adverse effects that they're doing with all the fumes, and say, Chelsea deserves more. Our residents deserve more. And yes, we will join a lawsuit if we have to, because that's the only way they listen. That's it. A lawsuit. Drag them. It's not a waste of money. If one threat of a lawsuit from a congressman gets them to at least start a study, then maybe it will get us the things that we deserve, that our residents deserve. Now again, the open period comment for the Terminal E is open right now. If you think you're adversely impacted by the air flights, call. The number to call for noise, 617-561-333. Every time you hear a plane, call and complain. Put it on auto dial. Because again, we deserve the soundproofing. We deserve the parks that they get over there, because we're putting up with everything. We have a whole waterfront, all called Airport Overlay District. And we get all the trucks, and we get the planes, but we don't get the benefits. We get all the ills. We get all the taxis driving through our community, causing all sorts of traffic. So please, join me. We have to fight. We have to push our leaders to fight for us and let them know that we're watching them. Thank you.
Any additional counselors? Recognize Councilor Vido.
I live at 140 Highland Street at the top of the hill, and when I first moved there and I started hearing the planes going, I'm like, holy moly, guacamole, it's bananas. I tried to call and report the noise. I wasn't in the flight path, but I'd sit on my front porch and see the planes going over my house. And as time went on, I feel like it's gotten worse. Sometimes I feel my house shaking. I've gotten several complaints from people in that area as well. I share Councilor Avellaneda sentiment. I do think that it's time that we do speak up. I feel almost like, I know for me personally, I gave up when I wasn't getting the response I wanted from Massport. I stopped calling. But I think it's maybe sometime that we, for lack of a better word, start making some noise. The number to call again, as Councilor Avellaneda said, is 617-561-3333, and I am all in on this fight. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Councilor Hada.
Yeah, that was a great resolution, Roy. Having been a pilot before, after college and everything, I can say that one of the issues that usually comes around with regards to rerouting an airplane is that you have hazards like safety issues, right? And as my former father-in-law used to say, when you're near water, you're probably going to get wet, right? So if you're living near an airport, you're probably going to hear some noise. Having said that, I do have to say that with you, I find it insulting that a city like Milton gets a response while we don't. And it really is a good idea to go ahead and go after Massport and say, listen, we realize the safety issues are the ones that are going to create, are what you're looking at. So what we need is we need for you to help us insulate our homes better so that we can minimize the effect, at least while we're inside our homes. Thank you.
Permission to speak from the chair? Oh, I'm sorry, Counselor Cooper.
I was one of the ones that got the installation, or no installation, the new windows, right? If we're gonna make Massport give us windows, tell them to give us better windows. Not like if they were doing it like he says in Milton, they would give them good windows. They gave us crap windows. The windows that I got are worse than they were before. They're smaller, you hear the same noise, so if you're gonna do it, make sure they give us good windows, not crap windows.
Chair against Counselor Frank.
I just wanted to clear a few things up. I don't think the counselor was suggesting that Milton got windows. The counselor was talking about Milton getting a response from Massport to redirect their flights. But our issue isn't as much redirecting, as much as we would like to redirect, it would be the windows. So I just want people to realize that the counselor, at least my reading of what the counselor said, was not that Milton was getting the windows. I also wanted to point out that the city does get something from Massport. We do get a monetary payment. We do get some of those windows. I don't personally think it's nearly enough, but I just want people at home that, we're hearing the arguments to know that it's not like the city has gotten nothing and the city leadership has never advocated for the city to get items and to get money. But what the councilors are suggesting is they want, additional, that we're not getting enough of that pie for what we get. And I would co-sign with the counselor across from me that we do have this thing called an airport overlay district. So even when you take the planes out of the equation, the fact that we can't build things on our waterfront like other cities very close to us can, because the airport essentially vetoes our ability to do anything but keep oil on some parcels or keep different, jet fuel. I believe we have all the jet fuel, most of the oil for that airport. So I just want to point out that we do have impacts beyond the planes going overhead, as the councilor said. But I did want to clarify that there was no suggestion by anybody that I heard saying that Milton actually got windows, because I don't believe they do. Thank you.
Permission to speak from the chair. So I'll start at the end and just say that I will point out that efforts over the years have gone into attempting to address this issue with Massport and Logan and with regard to noise and flights. And it's very, very difficult to do because of the numerous and overarching entities, including the FAA, that govern these things. But with that said, I agree with the enacting councilor and say that that does not mean we should quit. I came in and as a city councilor and these issues had been brought up, I went back to every councilor who had previously served on District 8 and had conversations with them about what they did and didn't do and what kind of success they had and didn't, because it's a huge issue. But again, I'll go full circle and I'll start where this started. And I'll just say, I reiterate my fellow councilor Evan's frustration. He and I went to a meeting regarding Terminal E in East Boston, and to some extent, we were there as the people kind of talking about the side issue at a meeting about something a little different. But I went, and I'll speak for myself. I went because you take any opportunity to speak to people you can at the higher levels. And we had an opportunity because there were 3 representatives from one FAA and 2 Logan individuals about environmental impacts. And the people heard what we said. People from East Boston actually were quite sympathetic to our plight. I brought up the question as to how geographically the line was drawn for where noise remediation was ended. I personally live on Admirals Hill. The waterfront has some remediation. Some people are happy with it, some are not, so that is a valid complaint. But it stopped at a geographical line that in many ways doesn't make sense, because I live on a hill. And while certain areas are geographically closer to the airport than where I live on a hill. And I can high-five a pilot that flies many planes over my head every 3 to 4 minutes at some times, and I have video of it. When they discuss terminal expansion, they're talking of E. They say many, many things that make you wonder why they can say it or ask questions. They say they're flying more people by the tens of thousands on a yearly basis, but there aren't a significantly large number of more flights. Doesn't make a lot of sense. I asked the question, are you flying larger airplanes? Because I don't know how to make that jive. Some of the questions are just tough to get answers to. I just will end by saying I share the frustration of my fellow counselor. I think we take any opportunity we can to put our 2 cents in. We don't have a ton of leverage on things like this at certain times. It's something that's been discussed. But unquestionably, in addition to the other health issues at the airport and airplanes flying overhead cause, noise is a major, major issue, and it has unquestionably gotten worse in the time that I have moved here to now. It's exponential. And anybody who tells me otherwise, any graph chart I see that tells me otherwise, it's simply not true. So I commend my counsel for bringing this up. I support him. I support this, and hope we can get somewhere. Chair recognizes Councilor Robinson.
In regards to your point, as a young man growing up here in Chelsea, we used to have 4-story buildings. And we used to think we'd go up on the roof and be able to pull a plane out of the sky. That's how low the planes were flying. I think it's important as a body, we either draft a letter or a resolution and send it to all our congressmen so that we get their attention and let them know that we're concerned about what's happening in our community in regards to the planes. I just wanted to add that.
Did you say roll call? Clerk, call the roll.
Councilor Frank? Yes. Councilor Vido?
Yes.
Councilor Rodriguez? Yes. Councilor Recupero? Yes. Councilor Murphy? Yes. Councilor Lopez?
Yes.
Councilor Tahada? Councilor Garcia?
Yes.
Councilor Avellaneda?
Yes.
Councilor Cortell?
Yes.
Councilor Robinson?
Yes.
11 in favor, none opposed, motion adopted. That's the final order, Mr. Chairman.
Public speaking, public announcements, I apologize. Chair recognizes Councilor Vido.
I forgot to mention this at the last council meeting, but I was invited over to the Kelly School for Hispanic Heritage Month to speak with the elementary school about your heritage and about the importance of giving back to the community. I saw a lot of familiar faces there, policemen, firemen, school committee. I was there, and other leaders in the community. These kids are brilliant. I swear, I don't know what they're drinking, what they're eating. These kids are smarter than I ever was. I had the luxury of speaking to Mr. Gomez's 4th grade class. The kids found out I was a city councilor and then started complaining about rats and and parking, and especially parking around St. Rose for some reason. But I just wanted to shout out Mr. Gomez's class and say it was an honor to be there. Secondly, Wednesday is the last day to register to vote. This is a crucial election. I won't tell you who to vote for, but please register and get informed. Find out what the questions are. I never used to listen to what the questions were, but those are very important. There's a booklet downstairs in front of the city clerk's office that lists it doesn't have the 5th question. The 5th question is the CPA. But it has the 4 main questions and both sides so you can educate yourself. Again, Wednesday is the last day to register to vote for the election in November. Very, very important. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Councilor Avellaneda.
Yes. I have 3 announcements, but I also want to follow up with my colleague and remind him the deadline is this Wednesday, but we get to start voting early, October 24th. Next Monday, we get to start voting for the first time in Massachusetts history. So residents who want to vote early can come to City Hall starting at 8 a.m., regular business hours. You can come to City Hall and vote at the city clerk's office. And even better, they're open on that Saturday. So I think it's the 24th, so I think it's the 28th? No, 20, I'm trying to think, 29th. So Saturday, September 29th, City Hall will be open. October, right? It's October 29th. City Hall will be open from 9 a.m. to, I think, is it 1? 1. So if you want to vote, you have no excuse. You have all of next week. Saturday, And if anyone wants a ride, call me. I'll give you a ride to the polls. Number one. The other announcements. This Wednesday, the 19th, the Chamber of Commerce is having their annual Pot of Gold event. Thursday, on the 20th at 4 p.m., we're having an event at the Burke Complex. It's called, was it Living Lights? No. Lights Out After School. And also, this Thursday, we're having a new theater opened up for the youth, the dedication for the Reisman Youth Theater at the, I'm trying to get the address, 177 Winnissimmet Street. That is the Apollinaire Theater. So busy week for all. Thank you. That's lights on after school, 4 p.m. at the Burke Complex, Thursday.
Chair recognizes Councilor Garcia.
Mr. President, so this announcement is actually specifically for residents that live at Hawthorne Street. For the past 2 weeks, I have had the honor to go door knocking once again with this mission of having a listening tour here in my district, but specifically Hawthorne Street. I partnered up with the neighborhood developers to create a neighboring circle where I invite small businesses, but also residents to meet me for dinner. The tab's on me. And the neighborhood developers. We will have a dinner on Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Again, it's this Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. at Bunker Hill Community College. I am inviting the residents specifically of Hawthorne Street because I want to get to know you a little better. I want you to tell me a little bit about your experience in Chelsea, but also start spurring a conversation between the residents and the local business owners in that area so we can talk a little bit more about your experiences, what things you see that can be improved in our community, and have an open dialogue about that. So do not be surprised. I know I've been door knocking for the past 2 weeks. The people that I have not been able to reach, and if you are watching at home, if you are a Hawthorne Street resident, please stop by this Wednesday, 6:30 at Bunker Hill Community College. It would be an honor to have you there. Thank you.
So I'll begin by just piggybacking on the Apollinaire Theater. Their opening, as was said, is October 20th from 6 to 8 for a new youth theater associated with the theater that they currently run. The contact for them and classes that they're offering. So they're official. So the dedication is October 20th from 6 to 8. It is at 187 Winnissimmet Street. They are actually opening on November 19th, where they have classes and the like. To contact them, www.aplaylab.com, www.aplaylab.com to find out what kind of courses they have. And you also can Google them at Apollinaire Theater. They are having an open house also on the 21st, October 21st from 4 to 6 for individuals looking to get involved in acting, dancing, and film. And those are youth from the age 3 to 18. The second public announcement, it was mentioned, is obviously voting is coming up. I would just urge everybody to take a look at the ballot questions before they go into the ballot. They're actually a little complicated to read for the very first time when you walk into the ballot. There are some serious matters on it, and I urge people to read them on a sample ballot, which can be found online. We have them at City Hall. Before you go into the ballot, if you have any questions about them, there's many people you can reach out to. If you have any questions about what their intentions are or what they mean, there's a number of people up here at least who are willing to help explain what they are. The last sub-announcement I will mention is, and I don't know a ton about it, but my fellow counselor, Judith Garcia, was picked to represent Massachusetts in a U.S. delegation going to Taiwan. That is a tremendous honor for her, and she will be missing one subcommittee meeting. She is excused. But it's an incredible experience for her, but it also is quite an honor. She's representing the state of Massachusetts, always represents Chelsea well, but the state of Massachusetts in a delegation going to Taiwan. I congratulate her, and it's with great pride that we send her off on our behalf, and have a good trip.
You come back safe.
Councilor Frank.
I just want to encourage all of the residents of Chelsea to go up to the top of Soldiers Home Hill at the field. A few of my colleagues and I and the city manager were there last night for the dedication of the new Vietnam memorial stone in the middle of the field. It's a beautiful view up there if you haven't been up there lately. The stone has a wreath out in front of it right now in dedication of the 50th anniversary of Vietnam, to acknowledge that, when the Vietnam veterans came back to the United States, when they came back, they didn't really get the best welcome. So the 50th anniversary is a big nationwide push to commemorate the 50th anniversary by having multiple events. In talking with the superintendent of the Soldiers Home, she said by signing up, she was committed to 4 events, and this was just event number 1 of 4. So people who are interested in the veteran community and interested in showing their thanks to the veterans and the condolences for the POW MIAs, there's going to be 3 more events over the course of the next year. So keep your eyes open, read the Chelsea Record. But in the meantime, feel free to stop up. The stone is very hard to miss. It's right in the middle of the field. They made a pathway to it, so it is handicapped accessible for anybody who has a walker or a wheelchair. So it's definitely something that, right in our own city, you can go visit and basically pay your thanks and condolences if you so wish. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Councilor Tahada.
Hi, and just to actually jump on your back on that, it is to commemorate the Vietnam veterans, but also the Korean War, because they also feel like they are the forgotten soldiers, the forgotten war. So, the Secretary Francisco took time to mention the fact that while we do go there, and it is from Malone Park to be, the park that represents the Vietnam War, it's also for the Korean War as well. So, just wanted to let you know that. Thanks.
A very nice event, and actually had the opportunity to serve during that era along with Sergeant Recupero. And I know when we came back, it was pretty tough coming back into the country because people didn't respect what was happening during the Vietnam War. But I think what we should know here in Chelsea, there's 11 young men from Chelsea who went to Chelsea High School, and Chelsea schools that lost their life over in Vietnam. And I think we should always remember the fact that a little city like Chelsea, we gave up 11 bodies to the war.
So I'd ask all rise for a moment of silence. So in that moment of silence, we'll include the 12 veterans who lost their lives in the Vietnam War. In addition to that, the wife of Sheriff Stephen Tompkins, Suzanne Dee Dee Tompkins, passed away after a long illness. I do not know her, but she is a very accomplished, well-respected woman, or she was. And heart goes out to Sheriff Tompkins, his family, her mother, and his kids. I would add another resident, Annie Jones' daughter, Regina. Her son passed away. Annie Jones is a resident of Chelsea, very involved. Regina is frequently here for events that take place in the city of Chelsea. She lost her son, and it was a horrible loss. So again, thoughts go out to Annie Jones and a moment of silence for her son.
Actually, for an aunt who passed away and donated her body to science, Lou Robinson.
Meeting is adjourned.